pleased to present Austin Faith Dialogue, brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries. In the weeks ahead, you will see these and other programs by various denominations. Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs series at the crossroads of religion and life. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues in the area in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Join us now for this week's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Steve Elias. Cálmate.
These are the sights and sounds of our children at youth. From drive-by shootings to the wearing of colors, is the presence of gangs becoming a tolerated way of life? Today, we will explore this issue. We will discuss how parents, faith groups, and other community organizations can help address the gang problem. Also, we will see who enters gangs, for what reasons do they do it, and what alternatives we as people of faith and integrity offer. Hello, I'm Valerie Bridgman Davis, co-pastor of Banah Full Community Church and your host for today's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue. Joining me today in our discussion is Dr. Betty Phillips, coordinator of Student Intervention Services with the Austin Independent School District. Mr. Harvey Jeffries, a casework manager with Travis County Community Supervision and Correction Department, and officers Robert Martinez and Mark Gill, gang liaisons with the Austin Police Department. Before we begin, I should tell you that they are all members of the mayor's task force on gangs, Mayor Bruce Todd here in Austin. Welcome to you all. I'm really glad that we're going to have this discussion today. We've done some talking before we got here, so we will kind of prompt each other on questions as they come up, and hopefully we will remember what we wanted to say. Let's start with kind of a working definition of what a gang is, and then we will talk about what you do as task force members and also what you see the problem is in Austin. Mark, you were going to tell us what the law on the books as of September 1 here in Austin.
That's correct. As a result of the passage of House Bill 549, the state has now addressed the criminal street gang in the state penal code for the first time in the history of the state by incorporating into the organized crime statute a definition of a criminal street gang, which is basically a group of 3 or more who have an identifiable sign, gang sign, a turf, and who engage in continuing criminal acts. And this definition provides a working definition for all of the jurisdictions in the state to be able to apply this new legislation, which includes the enhancement of gang-related crimes. In other words, if a gang member were to commit a third-degree felony, he would now be prosecuted for a second-degree felony. And it also involves the amount of time that community service hours or jail stays can be assessed by the judges in the court system. So we see this as a very useful tool to prosecution and law enforcement to attempt to decrease the amount of gang violence across the state of Texas, and we're very excited about it.
Good. This is like, I guess, some of the definition that came out of Florida. In fact, you sounded very similar to what Florida has said.
That's correct.
And what has just been put up on the screen. And also something that the Attorney General, Dan Morales, put out in the report that he did on kind of a definition of working gangs. Association is the main thing.
Right.
Yes.
Association and the continuing criminal episodes is also very prevalent in a lot of the definitions. And prior to this law coming into effect September the 1st, one thing that Attorney General Morales pointed out in his report was how the definition of a street gang varied from one jurisdiction to the other in the state of Texas, and that when he polled several major cities like Houston, Dallas, Austin, and like San Antonio, they discovered their definitions to be similar but not the same, and he is hoping to have all of the major jurisdictions in Texas network with each other to try to come up to an even keel with how they identify gangs, how they are going to assess their implication of the gang legislation that we now have in the state of Texas.
Robert, you and Mark together work with gangs here in Austin, and so you have some feel of how bad or how difficult the gang situation is here in Austin. Could you give us some kind of stats? Or
Valerie, I've been a police officer for 25 years, and I've never seen the violence that we had in 1990 involving kids, and especially gang members. We had 8 kids that got killed from 14 years old to 19 years old in 1 year, and that's 8 too many. We had 2 little kids that committed suicide trying to get out of gangs. They couldn't take the pressure. We had 125 kids that wound up at our hospitals seriously hurt, as far as getting hurt seriously trying to get in gangs, walking the line, which is jumping into a gang to prove yourself.
what's the term?
Walking the line.
Walking
it's
the
like
line.
Initiation. And last year was the highest year we ever had in car thefts and assaults. And this year we're trying to put a dent into that with this mayor's task force. Things have slowed down a lot. We have a lot of alternatives for kids, and this year we're going to be the most successful city in the state of Texas because of the mayor's task force and the opportunities and alternatives that they have come up with.
Well, I remarked off camera, and I will say on camera, that I have an 11-year-old son who is now in the 6th grade at Bedichek Middle School, and so I have a vested interest, since between 5th and 8th grade is when kids are most likely to be drawn into gangs. And one of the things that prompted this TV show was my son said to me at the end of 5th grade, "Mama, I'm not going to tell anyone that I can ride a skateboard, because if they find that out and I don't want to be in a gang, they'll beat me up." And so I became very aware in another way. I was always aware because I'm a citizen and a reporter, but I became very aware as a parent of what the impact of gangs in Austin is doing. And with that, I kind of, Betty, would like for you to talk about how the task force even got set up, what incident prompted. I think we saw the incident at the beginning of this show, what prompted the task force.
Yes, I think 2 things prompted the task force, and one was our continuing concern about our youth and the problems that they seem to be experiencing, dropping out of school, alcohol and drugs, teenage pregnancy, and so forth. So there was a growing interest in trying to develop some interventions to help the children. And then we became more aware that more and more of these high-risk children were becoming gang members, and that this was one other identifiable problem in addition to the other problems, which would make it much more difficult to help these young people. My role in the school district is working with students who commit suicide. What happened was we were working with a young man at a high school after he had killed himself. And he was one of the 2 that Officer Martinez mentioned. He killed himself because he found no other way to get out of gangs. And he could not stand this dilemma that he was in. He wanted to get out, found no way out. What happened after that is that we were trying to counsel the students. His friends were overcome with their grief. They were very sad, they were very angry, and they could not stay in counseling. And what they did was they acted in a way that they had learned in their gang. Because of their grief, they told their teacher they could not stand the pressure anymore, and that they were going to go out and shoot members of the other gang. They got in their car, got their guns, went down to Congress Avenue, happened to find a gang member down there who was a member of a rival gang who had nothing to do with the death of their friend, started shooting. And that was what happened at 5th and Congress. And I think you saw what happened after that, and that Mayor Cook said, this is the last straw. Yeah. We're going to get a task force of concerned citizens together, and we are concerned citizens, and we are still together, working to fight gangs and other problems of high-risk youth.
Yeah. And Harvey, that gives you a good entree because you are a concerned citizen and a part of this task force. Now you work, help me out because you know I always get this wrong. You work with the probation department. Can you?
Okay. Yeah, I work with Travis County Community Supervision and Corrections. That's formerly Travis County Adult Probation. That our title changed with the House Bill 2335 as of January 1st, 1991. We get brought into this when we have the older youth involved in gangs, and we have 2 gang caseloads to address this. Our capacity for those caseloads are 25 each. And what we try and do is address, because they are adults at that point, we try to address employment, vocational skills, and education. And we teach these things at our center at 1622 East Riverside Drive and address those problems with kids that are in gangs and try to just give them other things to do rather than being in gangs, give them employment, and try to show them a different way of life. And hopefully they won't continue to live a life of crime.
Which will now give me another entree because I don't think of my son as an at-risk child. I think it's risky because of the world he lives in. But my child has 2 parents, I mean, watching him every day like a hawk. He's in band, he plays sports, I mean, you know, pretty brought in by the church and by his family. So I don't think of him as at risk in that sense. I think of him as being at risk because he's a black male. I mean, that in itself makes him an at-risk kind of child for me. But can you talk about the children who are in gangs? What kind of family life they lead, what kind of community life they lead? And I guess, Betty, you can start. Robert, you can jump in. Either of you just kind of help out with that question.
A lot of the kids, but not all of the kids that end up in gangs are the children who are experiencing difficulty from the earliest starts of their life. Their needs are not being met by their families, not because the families don't care in most cases, we found out, but because their parents have severe difficulties of their own, economic difficulties, alcohol and drug difficulties, never learned to parent, so they may be abusive or neglectful type parents. There may be family violence, poverty, discrimination, those kinds of things that just make it a lot harder for them to grow up with a good self-concept. A lot of these kids grow up feeling like a failure from the very beginning. They start to fail in school, they start to fail in all aspects of their life, and they feel like their lives are worthless. We are now finding that a lot of kids are seeking out gang membership that do not, however, come from those kind of families. There are a lot of cultural influences of violence and so forth in the media, sexual exploitation, alcohol and drugs, kinds of things that even the best parents cannot protect their children from. So that combined with peer influences, need for protection, other kinds of peer influences are causing kids from all over the city, from all kinds of homes, to join gangs.
Pretty scary.
Yes.
Most, to just piggyback a little bit into what Dr. Phillips is saying, is that oftentimes they do come from the dysfunctional families, which makes it very difficult for that kid to have strong leadership and role models. So consequently then the gang become that extended family. And they get a bonding from each other that provides the kinds of excitement they like and enjoy, security, money they couldn't get out of at home, all those kinds of things. And most of them are also dropouts. And that's the basic kind of thing. But you find when you look around the country, and just California, for instance, Los Angeles, there are gangs that are not necessarily from dysfunctional families. They're rich kids that just nothing else to do and become gangs members to just do things that street gangs do. And we say gangs, and we're really talking about street gangs because there's a difference between, we're a gang of people here for a worthy cause, but street gang was the cause of violence and those kinds of things to destroy and disrupt people's lives. Those are the kinds of things we're trying to stamp out and hoping to work toward stopping in our community.
We worked some individual case histories in our city where we have been able to shatter the stereotype of what a gang member looks like. And
talk about that.
We've had the good fortune of working with some Austin youth that we have assisted in walking away from gangs, and to help us help others by providing a much-needed education on the lure of gangs and how it has crossed all racial barriers and all socioeconomic levels. We have confronted audiences in the city with our little guests who are former gang members, and there are a couple of former gang members here that would you could hear the mouths drop across the floor, because here stands a little 5'1", blue-eyed, blonde-haired, lovely little lady who was very active in a gang and who was capable and had a history of committing drive-by shootings, of abusing drugs, of engaging in gang-related sexual activities, and it's very important to realize that, as you mentioned, and I'd like to agree with you, that not all kids are at risk of joining gangs individually, but one thing that we point out to the children and to the parents that we lecture to is that in this very violent society that we live in, it's very difficult for a young person to go out for any 24-hour period without the availability of somebody or the opportunity itself for experimenting with drugs, premarital sex, gang activity, and these are just things that are out there. And we as parents, you know, we realize that we can't be with them all the time.
Right.
And for this reason, a combination of reasons, we feel like all of our kids are at risk. And it's for this reason that we approach this situation by really emphasizing the importance for parental education, so that they begin to look further into the activities of their children, so that they investigate questionable activity.
Who they're hanging with.
Who they're hanging with. You know, parents don't need a search warrant to go through their child's dresser to find gang graffiti or drug paraphernalia, and the parents in this day and age have to be better investigators at home. They have to be interested in what their children are occupying themselves with and whom they're occupying their time with.
I'd just like to say also to the community that this is not just a criminal justice system problem.
Right.
This is a community problem.
Which is where I want us to go right now.
Yeah, and the kinds of things the community can do to rise up and help with this problem is reclaim their community. And that's what we talk about, reclamation of the community. And you do that by, we have a situation going on out in East Austin there where churches are walking the streets to Chicon and praying and winning people back. You do those kinds of things to win back your community. When the policemen come in, you can better assist and ask these dope dealers and things, let them be known who they are. When they come through selling dope, take their license plate and give that information to the policeman. That's how you reclaim your community. I mean, you kids cannot sit back and wait for the policeman to take care of that problem, because they cannot. It's too widespread. Right. And these are gang members that's doing that, and these are the kind of things the community people can do to help save their community. Other than that, it's going to decay and continue to be disrupted.
I'm aware of Austin Travis County Youth Services is doing a graffiti wipeout, I think Saturday the 14th. Mm-hmm. So this will air after that has happened, but nevertheless, they are doing a graffiti wipeout. And I'm proud to say that the young man who did the poster for that is in our church.
How about
that? For the wipeout. But I wanted to go back before we go to what we can do, because you really cued something for me about the 5'1" female. Betty and I were talking earlier about the role of girls in gangs. Can you talk about that, Betty?
Yes, I can. And I think when people talk about gangs, they think young men. And of course, young men are the most obvious gang members. But girls are now joining male gangs. Girls are starting their own gangs. Girls are most often, however, hanging around the male gangs. Sometimes girlfriends, in many cases, sex objects. I mean, I just need to say that real directly. The guys in the gangs get a lot of attention by posturing around this whole macho posture. Who do they posture for? Well, they posture some for each other, but they posture for the females. And if the females were not there to be their admiration society, we'd have a lot fewer gangs. So that these young girls are not only participating in these activities, it's drawing them in to very damaging sexual activities, alcohol and drugs, hanging around with the wrong crowd, taking them out of school, taking them away from the civilizing influences of culture and into this other culture, which is very damaging.
Right.
Another thing about girls in gangs is that, aside from being the sex object, they're used by their gang fellow guys to carry their weapons, hold their drugs, because they know that oftentimes the policemen look to the guys to have those drugs and things like that. So they'll let the women and girls hold those drugs. In other parts of the country, for instance, like Detroit, they have women gangs, and they're more into money and controlling as is regular gangs around the country. And we identify gang members like hardcore wannabes and social gangs. They identify gang members in that sense as scavengers and corporate kind of gang members. And the women operate in more of a corporate style. It's about money, and they control and run their business just like a corporation. That's why it's called that.
You started to say, Robert,
Oh,
about...
Valerie, one thing I wanted to say, that the Austin Police Department is doing their job as far as arresting the hardcore gang members. We got more gang members in jail right now than ever, and it really hasn't slowed our recruiting of gangs down any. Kids are still trying to get
Wait a
in
minute,
gangs.
stop. You have arrested more, but it has not slowed down the initiation.
The recruitment.
Right.
We still have the same number of gang members. The crimes have slowed down a lot because of the mayor's task force and getting the community together and getting all these churches involved, and it's helped us a lot this year to control the gang situation. The secret to gangs is educating the community and educating the kids. And that's one of the job that me and Mark do, is going to the schools and teaching the kids the dangers of joining a gang. We can guarantee them this, that if they continue being in a gang, by the time they get to be 21 years old, they will either be in prison or they will be dead. It's like a done deal.
Betty and I were talking earlier, and she said something that really provoked in me, that most kids join gangs because they want quick friends. They want protection, they want association, they want bond, they want family. But what they don't realize is that they get just triple that many quick enemies. You get quick friends, but you also get quick enemies.
I think that's a very valid point that you made, and I'd like to follow up on it by past experience that we've had in dealing with those young people who are trying to get out of the gang situation. And I think it's important for any young person considering gang affiliation to realize that when you join a gang, you're instantly the enemies of all the other gangs. And that you stand a chance on becoming a victim of gang-related violence. However, it goes much further than that, because your family, the people that you care about,
Right.
are also going to face that same type of aggression, whether you're around or whether you're in a gang or whether you're trying to get out of a gang. But when a gang member decides to walk away from the gang, chances are very, very high that the gang he's trying to walk away from are going to be their enemies also.
Right.
So now it's all the gang members in town after him. Back to the family. We know of a family who was continually victimized by an act that they had nothing to do with. They had a family member who was in a gang, committed a crime, and now the family is paying for it all of the time. And they have to sleep on the floor every night because they're afraid the rival gang is going to commit a drive-by shooting. And it's been done time and time again. So people who care about those considering gang affiliation should really stop and think a moment. Is it worth putting my entire family at serious risk? Because it happens.
The bottom line for the end results of gang is that you either end up in jail, in prison, or dead. That's the end results of that.
Now, part of this issue is that we feel like, in addition to education, we need the social services, counseling, and the recreation. And because we know a lot of these kids know some of these things. They're smart enough to understand this in their mind, and they say to us, I will die for my gang. 10-year-old boys, and they are ready to face death because they think their life is worthless. And that's a critical part of it. Just say no approach is not going to cut it. The kids and the families need some heavy social service intervention and also recreational activities to keep them off the streets.
We're running out of time, which we all knew we were going to get to this. But I need to ask two really quick questions. One is, Robert, can you identify for us gangs in Austin? By name, colors, anything?
We have 55 gangs in Austin,
55
Valerie.
gangs.
We have 10 gangs that give us a lot of headaches. They give us police officers they commit a lot of crimes.
Name the
and
top
stuff.
three.
The Brothers, the EGVs, the Latin Kings, the Crips, 10th Street Syndicate, and the colors is black and white, gold and black, maroon and white.
Okay, so parents who see their kids coming in with certain colors and graffiti around should really be concerned.
Investigate.
Talk to us briefly about what can we as parents do to help our kids what if I found out my kid was in a gang? What do I do?
One thing I'd like to start off with that question is that the Austin Police Department has a pamphlet available free of charge.
Right.
It's titled Austin Street Gangs, and it can be obtained by contacting the Gang Liaison Unit at 448-0408 or the Austin Police Criminal Intelligence Unit, which is 480-5444.
Okay, and one of those numbers will be on the screen.
Okay, great. And this pamphlet gives a very good instructional information approach to a parent who wants to find out more about looking into their children's activity. However, the community needs more role models to keep our kids out of gangs, and I think that as a parent, I think that the relationship must be ever present with their children by keeping the lines of communication open, so that if there is a problem developing, that communication is built in so that they will be able to read the telltale signs of a child on the way to a negative type of lifestyle.
One of the things that I said before was that I'm very much aware that part of the problem is parenting, that a lot of kids, their parents work 2 or 3 jobs. They may care. They just cannot be there. And someone has got to surrogate parent. My house is always filled with kids. It used to irritate me to no end, but now I am beginning to be okay about being a community parent. Because 1, I don't want my child in a gang. And 2, I just hate to see some of these kids who I care about kind of strung out somewhere in the streets. You said, one of you, Mark, I can't remember which one it was, that the largest street gang in Austin is Austin Police Department. Your colors are blue and red.
Well, in reference to that statement, what I'd like to say is that of all the youth at risk involved, those that are in need of a law enforcement response make up a little over 10%. The vast majority of our kids are in need of educational, social remedy, and employment opportunities, and that, when kicked into the system, will remedy a lot of our trouble.
We're going to have to do this again. I know we are, because we're going to have to talk about what churches are doing, because some churches are doing great things, what community organizations are doing. I know Austin Travis County Youth Services is doing a wonderful job, and there are others here in the city that are really reaching out, and the Hangout in South Austin are really reaching out and pulling our kids in. I'm glad we were here as we end today's brainstorming session on how to help each other and what's going on in our community to save our children from these destructive ways of gangs. I want to thank you, Mark and Betty and Harvey and Robert, I'm getting the names here, for your ideas and for your input into this discussion. On behalf of Austin Faith Dialogue, I'm Valerie Bridgman Davis, thanking you for being with us today and asking our audience to join us again this time next week. Peace to you.
Information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.